Okay, so now we're on to our next panel, which is also talking about science and technology accelerating innovation, but from a different perspective, less about the scientists and more about technology transfer and how that handoff happens between the science that you just heard about and the companies and people that are going to try to commercialize that technology.
So I would just want to say thank you to everyone. My name's Kathleen Bruner. I'm President and CEO of Acumen Analytics, and we're very happy to be here today. So far, I think we've heard some amazing stories already. And together with my panelists today, we're going to talk a little bit about the intersection of science and technology. I think what you heard earlier about the dreams and the possibilities and where can we go is really part of the conversation about how can we take current and emerging and future technologies and marry them together with science and what's possible. So I'd like to give each of my panelists a chance to introduce themselves, and then we'll just kick off a conversation and we'll see where it heads.
All right, Eric Heil. I'm a managing partner at Medical Excellence Capital. It's a new venture fund launched in 2021, $150 million. By background, Penn Engineering with a Wharton MBA, and investor at Domain Associates out of Princeton for a while before turning entrepreneur with some Penn IP back in 2012. Successfully sold that to Nava Health, which is now part of United, and then teamed up with the Blue Cross and co-founded a company in 2017 called Upward Health in the more tech-enabled mental health services space. We're an early stage biotech-focused therapeutics fund. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Sangeeta Bardhan-Cook, and I'm the head of business development and the chief innovation officer at Temple Health and Fox Chase Cancer Center. I'm actually a Jersey girl, but I've been in Southern California for almost 20 plus years by way of my credentials as well. I did my scientific training at Caltech and USC with a PhD in microbiology. I also have MBAs from Columbia and the London Business School. Before I came here to Philadelphia, back home, I was actually at City of Hope for about 9 years and in charge of commercialization specifically of the cell and gene therapy programs over there. Through that amazing time, I was able to see just first-in-man trials that just blow your mind at times, and got to watch products like Breyanzi become approved products to reach more patients than ever. And I'm so excited to be able to go do that here in Philadelphia as well.
Awesome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Seema Kulkarni. I am special counsel at Duane Morris. Duane Morris is a large global firm based out of Philadelphia. My specialty is in the life sciences area. I focus on intellectual property, mainly patent prosecution and related commercial transactions. My background, I'm actually from Atlanta, Georgia. I went to school at Emory, and I worked in the lab for a while before getting my master's in immunology and working in industry for a short amount of time. My sweet spot is really working with emerging companies, startup companies, although I do work with large industry players, and I work with quite a few academic institutions as well. I love working with emerging companies because it's really like helping somebody take care of their baby and help nurture that little person along to become a full-grown adult and contribute meaningfully to the world.
Good. Hey everyone, my name is Andre. I did my graduate degree at Penn before spinning out a company called Vivadyne, along with my PI there, and so I think that's my relevance to the panel here. My key interests are in the scale-up of tissue engineering for drug discovery and development, with this kind of key idea being, if we have the same type of kind of unlimited substrate as semiconductors provide to mathematical computation, if we have an equivalent in biology where a single bright scientist can deploy, vivariums worth of research, the same way a bright computer scientist can deploy data centers worth of, computing power, megawatts of it, then we too in biology can begin to move at the pace of innovation in AI and in software technologies. And so what we are doing at Vivadyne is trying to create a highly scalable system to create human-like tissues at extremely large scale for this type of research. And then by way of locale and background, I'm a Canadian. So ended up here somehow.
Am I plugged in now?
Yep.
There we go. Hi, sorry. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Dibbling. I'm the Deputy Managing Director at the Penn Center for Innovation. You heard Dr. Epstein mention our organization this morning. We're close to 70 personnel, really focused on developing relationships with the commercial sector to advance discoveries and inventions that come out of the research enterprise at Penn. I oversee most of the business development activities for the organization. We're somewhat agnostic in terms of how we develop those relationships, whether it's a startup company, developing a corporate alliance, or a simple licensing transaction. We do all of the above. I've been at Penn for 7 years. I was recruited here from UCLA, and prior to that, I was at University of Chicago. And I'm a molecular biologist by training. It's been a really fun ride being at Penn these 7 years, as you can hear from some of the exciting science and technologies that are coming out of this region. So very happy to be here and appreciate the invite to be on the panel.
Excellent. So I thought I'd start the conversation to maybe open up with one of you or a couple of you to just talk a little bit about how recent technical advancements and how they maybe significantly impact your respective fields. And what innovations do you see kind of down the road? And then we'll maybe take a couple of questions more specifically to each of you.
I'm happy to start. So actually a couple of the presentations right before us are things of great interest and great discovery that's happening in our field, from computational to drug delivery and ultimately kind of gene-validated diseases and targets. So one of the things that enabled a company that's we've invested in, and I sit on the board, is No Bias out of CHOP. So I think there it's combining data with some expertise and insights from Silicon Valley tech world in order to do drug discovery and development for pediatrics to a level and a speed that has otherwise not been kind of seen before. So what we're seeing is on the kind of academic tech world, both computationally and these tools and technologies that even Andrea highlighted, I think just are incredibly exciting for us as a field.
Happy to sort of build upon that. I mean, I think, again, it's been mentioned again today already, but I think the developments with the development of the modified mRNA, I think you're really seeing a new modality, essentially. There's going to be a huge amount of activity, in this space, going beyond vaccines to therapeutics as well. And we also had a presentation about drug delivery as well. I mean, I think things like LNPs and just drug delivery in general was not considered, a particularly exciting or investable opportunity. And as we're seeing continued progress in that space, that's going to be an incredibly hot area, I think, as we develop those technologies further, such that there's more effective targeting and the like. I think you're going to see a huge amount of activity in the space, and then that's obviously going to tie into the mRNA as a modality and other payloads that you may be able to specifically deliver with these technologies.
So I think that with a lot of that comes the conversation with intellectual property. And Seema, I'm wondering, with some of these rapid advancements in the life sciences and being driven by technology, how has the patent and intellectual property landscape evolved? And maybe you can talk a little bit about challenges that innovators face in ensuring their breakthroughs are protected.
Sure. So when I started my career about 20 years ago, you would be handed a patent application to work on from a partner, and it would either be biology, or it would be chemistry, or it would be mechanical engineering. It was very clear as far as what that subject matter was. Nowadays, there's a lot of overlap in the inventions, right? So it's not just purely biology. Oftentimes, there's a software component to it. Oftentimes, there's an AI component to it. Sometimes there's a mechanical component to it. So now it's not sufficient to have just one specialist working on your patent application or working on protecting your proprietary innovation. It's really important to make sure that you have a team of experts that can fully appreciate all the nuances of that innovation in order to represent that accurately in a patent application and then prosecute it in front of a patent examiner. I think that's one of the areas where I see one of the biggest changes, during the trajectory of my career, that there's certainly a lot of overlap in the various technologies. Other challenges remain the same, that they've always been there. You know, I think a lot of people here in this room will appreciate that patents become very expensive very quickly. So what we find sometimes is that clients, whether they be emerging companies or established companies, are reluctant to really invest the resources at the time they need to into developing a robust IP strategy. And to, you know, while I appreciate that there are ways around that challenge, and one of the ways is to sit down with your IP specialist as early as possible in order to craft out a strategy that's going to serve you for the long term.
And I would imagine the conversation about intellectual property comes up a lot when you're talking about getting investments, looking for capital and other areas of funding sources as well, and having that in good order before you go and try and get that conversation.
The size of the moat is often one of the first conversations that comes up, right? It is, if you have great technology, that's fantastic. What is stopping someone else from doing the same thing, right? After you have put in the hard work of developing that technology. And you know, half of the answer is the protection you have around IP. Is it technically possible for someone to duplicate it, you know, in their own lab and perform it? The other half is the execution mode, of course, right? So just because you know, someone can modify or can circumvent the patent very slightly, can they still do the execution half? But without the protection on IP, I think many technologies become uninvestable. So the protection of those technologies is exceptionally important. And very importantly, I think, the opportunity to develop these technologies at a university means that you know, all of the kind of modalities of technology available to you at a university through the different specialties and you know, specialty areas of PIs at universities, the different cores, the different technologies at universities, it allows you the opportunity to incorporate these things into your technology if they are useful, or to create embodiments in those fields. And so the ability to invent at a university and create IP around it, I think, amplifies the kind of coverage and domain of your original invention, even if they end up being, you know, continuing applications or you know, expansions later on.
Yeah, I think I'll just add to that a little bit. I mean, I think that, you know, IP is critical. You know, specifically, particularly in the biotech space. You know, you want to create an exclusive position in the marketplace. You know, we're often engaging with companies though very early, and sometimes it's pre-IP. And in fact, what the partnership is about is, you know, building that relationship between industry and the academic, obviously with the goal of developing inventions that can subsequently be protected and then be commercialized. But I think sort of gone are the days where, particularly in biotech, where we're essentially just licensing out a patent and, you know, we say good luck to the company, they go on their merry way, and maybe we get a royalty at the end of the day. I mean, maybe the patent is a tool to get a company interested to come and talk to us, meet with our faculty, you know, see whether there's alignment in terms of the objectives of the company and the objectives of the faculty member, you know, and can we build a relationship that is going to advance the objectives of both parties? It's really a focus for us.
Mm-hmm. I think I see it a little bit differently, actually. I think I see that if you're trying to take a technology, whether it's a therapeutic or a diagnostic, and you're envisioning what your partner, your commercial partner, would be for their own strategy, your IP strategy needs to invariably be married to that business strategy. And IP isn't just a patent, right? IP is know-how. IP is trademark. IP is trade secret. IP is a bunch of different things. It's not just one piece of paper you get from the USPTO. And knowing how to space it, knowing how to really validate it as well, as opposed to putting something on a page and thinking you have protections that you really won't or won't be able to withstand a challenge in court. And so if you look at it just a little bit differently, that the IP strategy is something that goes in parallel with the technological development. Instead, you look at it as, how do I make the best technology? How do I make the best therapy? And then what are the appropriate protections that you need to do so it has a chance in the market and reach as many people as possible? So it's kind of the same as what you guys are saying, but slightly different.
And from our world, we've seen too many deals not go through because geography or limitations to the claims and continued filings. So we actually encourage researchers, scientists, just to start a dialogue early so that if we can be aware of it, tracking it, encouraging or influencing kind of the translational science, we can then support some of the budget or funding, ultimately to get there, or at least work with tech transfer to say this is on our radar and we want to do something down the path. But also, it's never perfect coming out of tech transfer. So, I mean, just the realization that it's going to take work, more data, and more support ongoing. So, not getting hung up too much early on being perfect.
I mean, I think that's why the relationship is so important, because at the end of the day, you can look at Penn and you can look at some of the successes, and we have amazing faculty, but our faculty they're not business people. They're not always thinking about what some of them are, but a lot of them are not thinking about what their commercial embodiment is going to be. And so I do think having those conversations as early as possible are really important. And if we can bring in a party that can provide the business perspective within a specific field, that's value add for us, whether it be an investor or whether it be someone from an entrepreneur or whether it's someone from an existing commercial entity.
I think it has to be a collaborative process. Exactly. I think the researchers have to have a say as well as the business people. I think a lot of people here would be familiar with the fact that when you file a patent application on a drug, it might be 15 or 18 years before that drug is going to see the light of day. And at that point, you don't have very much time left on your patent. So you need to have somebody that's involved in the story of this invention that keeps track of what's going on and realizes that, hey, did we file a patent application on the formulation? Yep. Did we look at dosing? Did we look at the PK data? I think it's really important to make sure that your patent attorney is like your partner and is kept fully informed of the story as it unfolds.
Mm-hmm. And I think you guys all brought up the story of partnerships and collaboration, and then one of the threads I heard was maybe marketability. So maybe we can talk a little bit, and maybe Sanjita, you could talk about this partnership and then really addressing the conversation. A patent doesn't mean marketability, right?
Well, when you're particularly in therapeutics, it's not the same thing as if you're trying to do like A/B testing on an app, right? If you are working on something and it brings a therapeutic benefit to a patient, you're pretty golden, right? But it just takes a really long time to do it. And the more that people are informed of the entire process, the smarter the decisions are in development and the faster you get to it. And so being able to sit down, so when I'm talking about university folk, right? Being able to sit down and ask them, have you envisioned what your phase 1 trial would look like? Right, before they've even done the medicinal chemistry optimization is an important step, just getting it into their heads, right? And, I have opinions on basket trials, right? And I usually move people away from those kinds of thinking as well, but, or just being able to, when you are having a partner, just saying, okay, let's sit down and let's talk about what a roadmap looks like for this type of pipeline and what's necessary. Do the two parties have everything that they need? Do we need to get other parties involved with it? Is there a gap in this understanding, right? And so we're kind of blessed in the therapeutic space in that if you show efficacy, you're gonna get somewhere, right? Some partner will find it if you have a good population that you're treating, that one that needs it, and you show something that helps. But starting that conversation of, where's your impact landing? Are you actually getting there? Are you thinking about manufacturing? Are you thinking about scalability? Are you thinking about your patient population? Starting it from that I think naturally goes towards marketability, and starting it as early as possible, to your point, right? With your right counselors, whether they're IP or business folk, I think accelerates the discovery faster for patients.
Yeah.
So I think that's maybe a little bit about getting to the marketplace, and then maybe we can talk a little bit about, the ultimate goal in some cases is the spin out, right? So what is it that in that partnership and collaboration between the academic research and commercial ventures, what does an early stage investor look like? And what is the challenge that you face when you're trying to transform academic research into a viable business?
Yeah, what does a venture capitalist look like? Well, he's not 6'8" normally. So for us, it's actually like a tripod as we think about it. So scientific validation, right? So what do you have scientifically that's been validated, whether it's peer review, an outside scientific collaborator that has gotten excited about your technology. So just really looking for both the data sets generated and what external validation have you delivered scientifically. The second bucket truly is on the business side and on the entrepreneur or operational side. So how do you get somebody else excited about your technology? Whether it's an entrepreneur or other investor, you got to be able to convince somebody else that this is a really good idea. And who is that and why? And I would really encourage those that have been successful, seen exits, to spend some time to try to be that validating voice for some of the first-time entrepreneurs. Having worn that hat, to become a serial entrepreneur, you have to do it the first time, right? And the only best way to do that is to surround yourself with mentors, people that have been there, done that. But it's a cycle. Once you do, you got to get back and kind of fill that validating role for some of these early entrepreneurs and scientists. So that's point number two. And then other is funding, right? So did they get grant funding? Did they get some early seed funding? Did they get some friends and family? And really that validation financially in terms of how they got involved. So those are the three things. Not all of them have to be together, at the start. But at least work on all three of those in parallel and try to find those early validating points, to your point, moving the science forward so that you can deliver on a plan and then show other larger later stage investors that, look, we set out this plan, these are the milestones, these are what we're executing on. But really, the last piece is the people relationship side of this. These are long 7-10 year deals that we're involved. And so for us, it's a bit of a dating game because we're going to be married with you for 10 years and in the trenches working through. So can you have a dialogue around the tough stuff and be okay? Because it's business, it's the science that is just sometimes out of our control, but yet it's the people side to continue to encourage, have empathy, and work through some of the trenches. So that's so critical early on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think there's a very strong alignment between the end goals of most young and kind of later stage startups and the VCs that fund them, and that the kind of main three things in my mind are someone has to care about what you're doing. There has to be some market or some customer that can stand to benefit from what you're doing. And then you have to be able to deliver that thing. And then lastly, you have to be able to deliver it at large scale so that it is a venture scale business. And just keeping those three things in mind, both as on the operations side of the company as well as on looking for companies that have those qualities, really is the fundamental basis for all of this. Having IP that supports the product is just another pillar of the execution. Having this very significant impact on technology as it stands is another part of having market fit. Most fundamentally, if someone cares about it, and the impact is very large, and it is a venture scale business that is worth its weight in gold, then I almost find it kind of interesting that by trying to solve a very big problem, a lot of the very large challenges of solving many smaller ones kind of go away. In other words, if the problem is very hard, you have to swim the moat to get there and solve it. If the problem is very hard, it means a lot of people also think it is hard, and so it is probably worth solving. If the problem is very hard, a lot of people probably care if you solve it, and so the story becomes easier to tell. And I think ultimately the investors in venture capital and later stage in private equity markets and the companies themselves that try to fulfill those goals, although their kind of expertise is different to begin with, the resulting goal is extremely parallel.
But let me throw out a couple stats. So since we founded the medical excellence in 2021, we've seen 860 deals in these 2.5 years, and we've made 10 investments, right? So that, and we, like 500 different meetings with the full team in further due diligence. So the numbers, it's not always you, right? It's not always your challenge, your problem. It's a fit, right? And we're trying to make a portfolio, a construction, trying to think about stage and modalities. So there's a lot of other factors that are kind of outside of the story in the business. Doesn't mean it's a bad idea, right? So just because you get no a lot in venture, and we're in the business of having to say no a lot to find that fit, but just don't get too discouraged. Take the feedback, the learnings, and craft your story if it's helpful, but don't get too discouraged by hearing no.
So I think one of the other things that we've heard a little bit about is technology and future solutions. And maybe I want to turn the conversation a little bit about, where are things going? And one of the bigger conversations I think we're hearing, especially coming from some of the larger pharmaceuticals and biotechs, is a conversation about sustainability, right? And sustainability takes a lot of different forms. It can be the environment. It has to do with animal testing. So there's a variety of different conversations, carbon footprint, and those kinds of things. So, and maybe I'll start with you. I know your company has some technology in this space, and so maybe we can shift the conversation a little bit about that, because I think it's becoming more important to investors.
Yeah, I think you have this very difficult constraint in biotech, which is that the substrate that provides you the answers to the questions that you were asking is not very easy to miniaturize. You cannot make cells smaller. You can't make mice are kind of the smallest mammal that's close enough to people, right? Whereas in the computational side of things, and in kind of inorganic technology, the speed of computing doubles every few years. In AI, it's more than doubling every few years, and so it is possible within the same footprint and with ever increasing efficiency to do more and more, and to dramatically amplify the kind of technological extent of your capability. In biotech, if I wanted to answer twice as many questions with the current modalities of research, what do I do? Right? I build a second vivarium, a fifth vivarium. There is a scale limitation to the infrastructure that we have currently. And the infrastructure, I think, is the big thing. I think part of the reason why sustainability comes up often is there is this kind of underlying current of efficiency kind of underlying it, right? So sustainability is almost the consequence of having a more efficient process. Better data is also a consequence of having a better process. And if we are able to create a process that gives us data that is more and more human-like and more predictive, without compromising the ability to scale that process by requiring experiments on live animals that can't be automated very easily, that have to have a certain floor space, that have to have airflow requirements and room size requirements, then we are able to accelerate that process much more dramatically. And to be honest, the kind of singular obsession I have is with this idea that I can go to my computer and just with a single keystroke have a multiple megawatt sized data center do work for me all day, 24/7. Sits there, cooling water comes in, data comes out, and I can't do that in biotech. Bright scientists cannot do that. You have to move this massive cruise ship of a vivarium or a research team of hundreds or even thousands of people just to trudge forward through some of these essential data packages. And if we are able to create a parallel to that in biology where a single bright scientist can deploy dozens and dozens of vivariums worth of scientific investigation, both to answer questions, also to produce training data for more advanced AI models, then we can really begin to kind of get moving with some of these things. And I think it's incredibly important from a sustainability perspective in that the resources required otherwise to achieve those ends would be, crazy, right? Cover Philly and vivariums, kind of crazy. Yeah, we have enough rats, So.
How do you see that the opportunity to compress the timeline? We talked earlier about how long it could take to get a drug to market. Mm-hmm. I think it's probably very possible and probably needs to be quantified, but as you see more and more digital solutions, I know there's digital bioreactors now and some other things like that, but
Yeah.
what's the opportunity there possibly?
I think a big driver of timescales as well is the logistical basis of what do you need to run an animal study, even to contract a CRO to perform in vitro type of work is not a simple process. You don't decide one day, like you would with software, I should deploy this, and then Amazon says, all right, send me the terminal command, and I'll start working. It is months and months of lead up. With animal studies, it can be up to in over a year before the thing even starts. And if a research team went to their 3Rs program, which is the kind of animal sustainability and kind of reduction efforts within pharma, if they went to their 3Rs team and said, I have this combinatorial study that I would like to run. I have a couple different compounds that I'd like to test in combination, a couple concentrations of each I'd like to look at. We'd like to look at the regimen of this dosing as well, and should we dose once a week, should we dose once a day, high acute concentration, or should we spread it out a little bit? And we also want to take 10 time points of these mice. So we have about 1,000 different groups that we want to look at. They'll look at you like you're out of your mind. I mean, there's no way, right? There's no way to acquire the data that can answer all of those questions. And so instead, we have to use intuition. We pick what we think are, let's say, the top 3 kind of axes of those questions, maybe end up with 5 or 10 groups. And invariably, the axes that we choose are those that we are most certain about. And that is not the way to move forward in discovery, right? Is to do the things that you know well.
Right.
Most people here in research, I think, would agree that the what the heck is happening kind of moments are where discovery comes around and where most of the innovation comes from. And so the ability to explore and to deploy studies at very large scale becomes an incredibly powerful driving force for that as well. So, to do it at large scale and optimize to avoid having to go back and repeat process, to be able to do these things in a matter of days or 1 or 2 weeks instead of many months, and to be able to begin immediately without having to consider how do I ramp up a team of 1,000 people or 500 people, I think is also critical for timelines. I think we should hold folks in software and in kind of tech development in general as a kind of, I don't want to say a role model or a beacon, because biology has some different time scales, but those technologies move very quickly. Because they fundamentally, in order to compete with one another, have to move faster than the next competitor. And so there's a huge amount of pressure to build quickly, to fail fast, to just move and figure out what is the next likely failure point, and how can I solve it now so when I get there I can just breeze past it. And in biology, because everyone is kind of dealing with the same timelines, the same overall time pressures, there is not yet the strong competition to compete. And so I also hope that we can change that.
Any comments?
I'd sort of add as well, just on the AI piece. If we can obviously in terms of like having an impact on, the number of animals that have to get used in like a preclinical study, that's huge. But I think, we're seeing a ton of deals in this space, right, where the drug companies are looking at like AI even a step before there for drug discovery and drug synthesis. And I'm just really excited to see what happens in that space. I think there's companies out there now that are having assets going into early stages of clinical trial with drugs that have been designed, at least with the help of AI, right? It's going to be interesting to see how that kind of proves out. And even beyond the animal testing, I think there's once you've done the preclinical work and you're in the clinic, there needs to be a way to build efficiencies into that process. It's not an area where I have like deep expertise, but you look at drug development timelines, and we all know how long it takes to actually get an asset to clinical development. And are there technology solutions out there that can help with creating more streamlined or creative clinical trials where we can get to an answer quicker?
And I think someone mentioned earlier about making sure that we have, enough people in the trial, but also the right people in the trial.
You definitely see that. I'm sure the audience is all aware of this, but you look at how difficult it is sometimes to recruit people for clinical trials.
Right.
Just because there's so many drugs in development and there's only so many patients willing and able to enroll in clinical studies.
Yeah, I think one interesting kind of analogy is in automobile development. So Tesla, Ford, whatnot, when they design their cars for safety, a incredible capability they have is to simulate how that car responds in a crash test, right? And this is kind of obvious, but when you simulate what happens to the car, the accuracy of modern simulation is enough that you can't quite see the paint specks flying off, but the travel of the wheel, exactly where it moves, the G-loads encountered by the occupants of the car, the way the crumple zones move into the car and dissipate the energy, all of these things are incredibly accurate in those simulations. And so when you take the real car to the NHTSA and you perform this crash test, you basically get what you've seen before. It hits the wall, wheels move that way, energy transfers as you predicted, and there are no surprises there. That is because the predictive model of that real-world test is incredibly comprehensive and incredibly detailed. It is much easier to model a metal alloy than it is to model, biology by several orders of magnitude. But ultimately, if we have such a thing in biology for the development of new medicine, which is we have this computational crash test model, and if we can develop that model with a lot of real-world training data, then we are able to apply the same principle where you can test many millions of variants of that car in parallel and identify which one is going to have the best outcome, and then just test that one and show it works. And those changes that you make to optimize that automobile can come with hundreds of independent modifications or interventions to that design, as opposed to if I turn this one screw, will I fix my check engine light? You have a much broader kind of array of combinatorial screening and such if you have the efficiency of software to guide it. So the constantly improving predictive models in biotech, I think, are also a massive kind of accelerant to reducing timelines and to becoming more sustainable and more efficient in the process.
I think we might be at time, or do we have time for questions, or do we? So I think we have time for a couple of questions. I don't know. Oh. I can't see very well, so.
And thank you. I project. I have a question about what we were just talking about and using predictive models and the such, just to ramp up, actually kind of two questions. One is when it comes to ramping up the timeline, we saw with the pandemic how many, what the population kind of felt like when things came out so much faster than what they're used to, that there was a whole sort of just kind of disbelief and maybe unsureness of whether or not they want to use these drugs or vaccines or things like that. So how do we improve our education and communication to public when it comes to making such extraordinary advances in innovation in drugs, and so that we can get not just more participants in clinical trials, but actually have our patients want to use these drugs. And then my other question has to do with getting all of this data and having more access to more, whether it's universities or companies or startups, to have these larger databases of information about whatever the innovation is, or the science, or the real world data, to have more, just to be able to have a better predictive model so that we can do so much more. You're talking about auto crashes, and I mean, physics is physics, and that's why it's very predictable. But these predictive models for biotech in the body are so much more complicated. There's so many more variables. Mm-hmm. So what sort of collaboration and I know there are centers for information and databases, but is that expanding? Is that something that we're doing in Philly and globally, so that we can have better predictions?
Yeah. So I think two kind of points there. I think that the timeline of clinical trials, I would honestly take the side of it is better to be safe. I mean, at least with kind of angel on one shoulder, devil on another. Like it is probably good to be at least reasonably comprehensive and not say, okay, well, just like in a car, if I told you, trust me, the crash tests were so good, you should start driving it. You don't want to see it in person, right? So that is at the kind of local scope of a clinical trial. I think thinking just about timelines at large, like how quickly are we making progress on like really addressing serious disease? In the past 70, 80 years, the computing power available to a single individual has gone up by like millionfold, right? Thereabouts, if not slightly greater, like 5 millionfold. Even the safety of cars, as an example here, has gone up like crazy from bench seats where you hope not to crash to surviving very high-speed collisions. Human lifespans have increased by, I think, 1 year over the past 1 or 2 years over the past 80 years, and they're actually going down now, right? So I think that the kind of timeline and innovation that we should also be thinking about is how can we just get this whole process moving more quickly and kind of march towards the goal of making even faster progress on improvements into public health.
Yep.
And then in terms of the prediction, I'll just answer quickly. The biggest limitation currently is with a lot of the machine learning models that exist today, they are built on data, right? Like the machine learning model basically is the data. It is the machine learning model allows you to fit a very complex function to very complex data. But if you do not have enough data to unambiguously kind of fit those parameters, then it is very difficult to draw predictive conclusions, or if the data itself is so different from the thing that you're trying to infer. And so a massive limitation currently is it is very easy to produce data at high throughput that is low content. It is very difficult to produce high content data, like in vivo data or human data at high throughput, especially at the scale needed to learn all of the parameters of biology, right? There's the kind of more parameters you have in a system, the more complex the model you need to fit it. And if we have the kind of feature depth of biology, it is extremely difficult to cover that with only a little bit of data. And so I think one of the most important driving factors of the coming, let's say, decade in biotech is going to be accelerating the rate at which we can acquire both deep and very broad data. So deep in terms of lifelike and realistic and exceptionally well resolved, and then broad in the sense that we are extremely comprehensive in from whom we gather that data and the scale of that data collection to understand how the body responds to these interventions.
So I think we're out of time, and I think what we heard is kind of like that commercial, if you remember that little girl that was like, when you want more, you just want more. And she was talking about more data, more of this, more everything, right? So that's what we need. Well, I'd like to say thank you to everyone on the panel, and you can catch them at lunch and for the rest of the day, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.